I want to talk to you today about something I've learned the hard way, something that completely changed how I move through life. It took me years to understand this, and honestly, it hurt to learn it. But once I got it, once I really internalized this truth, everything shifted. People who used to drain me suddenly had no power. Situations that would have destroyed me before became mere background noise. And the relationships that were meant for me, they revealed themselves clearly, without me chasing, begging, or proving anything. What I'm about to share with you isn't just theory. This is lived experience. This is what happens when you stop performing for people and start protecting your peace. Here's what nobody tells you about relationships, friendships, family dynamics, and even professional connections. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. The person constantly demanding attention, creating drama, and forcing others to react is actually operating from a place of deep insecurity. Real power, real strength, real confidence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It simply exists quietly, consistently, unmoved by the chaos around it. For most of my life, I thought staying engaged meant I cared. I thought responding to every provocation showed I was involved, that I was present, that I mattered in people's lives. I believed that if I went silent, people would forget about me. I was terrified of being irrelevant. So I showed up everywhere. I answered every call. I engaged with every complaint. I defended myself against every accusation. I explained my choices to people who had no right to question them. And you know what happened? I became exhausted, completely drained. I was giving my energy to people who weren't investing anything back into me. Then something clicked. I realized that my presence in some people's lives wasn't actually about connection. It was about convenience. I was available, so I was used. I was responsive, so I was manipulated. I was kind, so I was taken for granted. And the moment I started to create boundaries, the moment I started to pull back and observe rather than react, everything became clear. The people who genuinely valued me didn't panic when I went quiet. They didn't create narratives about me or spread rumors. They simply reached out with genuine concern, with real curiosity, with authentic care. But the others, the ones who were just using me as an emotional dumping ground, as a source of validation, as someone to control, they lost their minds. They couldn't handle my silence because my silence took away their power. See, manipulative people need you engaged. They need you reacting. They need you defending yourself because your defense confirms that they still have influence over you. The moment you stop playing that game, the moment you detach quietly and just observe, they realize they've lost their grip. Let me tell you what detaching quietly actually means, because I think a lot of people misunderstand this concept. It doesn't mean you become cold or cruel. It doesn't mean you cut everyone off or build walls so high that nobody can reach you. Detaching quietly means you stop giving your energy to situations and people that don't serve your growth. It means you step back from the noise and create space for clarity. It means you stop trying to convince people of your worth and instead let your actions, your peace, and your consistency speak for themselves. When I started doing this, when I really committed to this practice, I noticed patterns I had been blind to before. There were people in my life who only called when they needed something. There were relationships that only existed when I was the one initiating. There were dynamics where I was constantly proving myself, constantly explaining, constantly justifying my existence. And when I stopped, when I just went quiet and stepped back, most of those connections disappeared. Not because I ended them, but because they were never real to begin with. That realization hurt. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend it didn't. It's painful to recognize that people you invested in, people you showed up for, people you loved, were only around because of what you provided, not because of who you are. But that pain is necessary. That pain is information. That pain teaches you discernment. It teaches you that not everyone deserves access to you. It teaches you that your energy is sacred and should be protected. What I've learned is that silence is one of the most powerful tools you have. In a world that rewards constant noise, constant performance, constant availability, choosing to be silent is revolutionary. When someone attacks you and you don't respond, you take away their ammunition. When someone tries to provoke you and you remain calm, You expose their desperation. When someone expects you to chase them and you simply let them go, you reveal the truth about the relationship. I used to think that not responding made me weak. I thought silence meant I didn't have an answer, that I was running away, that I was admitting defeat. But now I understand that silence is often the strongest response. It says, your opinion of me doesn't define me. Your need for drama doesn't control me. Your attempt to manipulate me doesn't work anymore. Silence protects your peace while exposing other people's intentions. Here's what happens when you detach quietly. The people who were performing for you, who were pretending to care, who were keeping you around for their own benefit, they reveal themselves immediately. They get angry. They spread lies. They try to paint you as the villain in their story. They reach out to mutual friends and create narratives that make them look like the victim. They post cryptic messages on social media hoping you'll see them and react. They do everything they can to pull you back into their drama because your absence threatens the illusion they've created. But the people who genuinely love you, they respond differently. They give you space because they trust you. They reach out with curiosity, not judgment. They ask if you're okay, not what they did wrong. They respect your boundaries because they understand that healthy relationships don't require constant performance. They know that sometimes people need to step back, to recalibrate, to focus on themselves, and they don't take it personally. I remember the first time I really practiced this. There was a friendship that had become toxic. Every conversation turned into a competition. Every achievement I shared was met with minimization or one-upmanship. Every struggle I mentioned was used against me later. I kept showing up because I thought that's what loyalty meant. I thought good friends pushed through the hard stuff. But eventually, I realized this person didn't want a friendship. They wanted an audience. They wanted someone to make them feel superior. So I stopped engaging. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't send a long message explaining why I was pulling back. I just stopped being available in the same way. I stopped sharing my wins. I stopped confiding my struggles. I stopped responding immediately to every text. And you know what happened? This person didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't express concern. They got angry. They accused me of being fake, of abandoning them, of changing. They told mutual friends that I thought I was too good for them now. That response told me everything I needed to know. A real friend would have noticed the distance and reached out with care. A real friend would have asked what was wrong and how they could help. But this person's immediate reaction was to attack, to blame, to create a narrative where they were the victim and I was the villain. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't lost a friend by pulling back. I had simply stopped participating in a dynamic that was never friendship to begin with. This is what detaching quietly teaches you. It shows you who people really are when you stop performing for them. It reveals the difference between genuine connection and transactional relationships. It helps you understand that not every loss is actually a loss. Sometimes what you thought was a friendship was just a habit. Sometimes what you thought was love was just familiarity. Sometimes what you thought was loyalty was just fear of being alone. As I got older, I started to value my peace more than I valued being liked. I started to prioritize my mental health over maintaining relationships that required me to be someone I'm not. I started to understand that it's better to be alone and at peace than surrounded by people and constantly anxious. This shift didn't happen overnight. It took years of being hurt, years of giving too much to people who gave nothing back, years of realizing that I was depleting myself to fill cups that had holes in them. The beautiful thing about detaching quietly is that it creates space. Space for clarity, space for healing, space for the right people to enter your life. When you're constantly engaged with the wrong people, when you're constantly managing drama and navigating manipulation, you don't have room for genuine connections. Your energy is completely consumed by people who don't deserve it. But when you step back, when you create that space, you start to notice the people who have been there all along, quietly supporting you, respecting you, loving you without demanding constant proof. I've also learned that detaching quietly isn't just about other people. It's also about detaching from your own need for external validation. For years, I measured my worth by how many people wanted to be around me, by how many invitations I received, by how many people liked my posts or responded to my messages. I thought being popular meant being valuable. I thought being needed meant being loved, but I was wrong. Real value doesn't come from how many people want access to you. It comes from how well you know yourself, how consistently you honor your values, how effectively you protect your peace. Real love doesn't require you to be available 24/7. It doesn't demand that you sacrifice your boundaries to prove your care. Real love is patient, understanding, and respectful of your need for space. When I started detaching from the need to be constantly validated, everything changed. I stopped posting things to see how many people would engage. I stopped sharing my plans to see who would be excited for me. I stopped seeking approval for my choices. I just started living according to my own values, my own goals, my own vision for my life. And you know what? The people who mattered stayed. The people who were only around for the show disappeared. And I was okay with that. One of the most powerful aspects of detaching quietly is that it forces you to confront your own patterns. When you step back from the noise, you start to see your role in the dynamics you've been complaining about. You start to recognize that maybe you've been accepting breadcrumbs and calling it a feast. Maybe you've been tolerating disrespect and calling it loyalty. Maybe you've been ignoring red flags and calling it giving people chances. I had to face some uncomfortable truths about myself. I had to admit that I often stayed in situations longer than I should have because I was afraid of being alone. I had to acknowledge that I sometimes allowed people to treat me poorly because I didn't think I deserved better. I had to recognize that I was often so focused on being there for everyone else that I neglected myself. These realizations were painful, but they were necessary for growth. Detaching quietly gives you the opportunity to break these patterns. It allows you to step back and ask yourself hard questions. Why am I accepting this? What am I afraid will happen if I let this go? What would my life look like if I only kept relationships that added value? These questions can be terrifying because they force you to confront the possibility that you've been settling, that you've been playing small, that you've been giving your best to people who don't appreciate it. But on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. When you start making choices based on what truly serves you rather than what keeps other people comfortable, your entire life shifts. You stop feeling obligated to attend events you don't want to go to. You stop maintaining friendships that feel like work. You stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided what they think about you. You just start living authentically. And that authenticity attracts the right people while repelling the wrong ones. I've noticed that the people who get most upset when you detach quietly are the ones who benefited most from your lack of boundaries. They're the ones who got used to your availability, your forgiveness, your willingness to overlook their behavior. When you change the rules, when you stop playing the game they created, they panic. They try to guilt you back into the old dynamic. They remind you of history, of all the times they were there for you, even though if you really examine it, they were only there when it was convenient. Don't fall for it. Don't let guilt pull you back into situations you've outgrown. Don't let nostalgia convince you to accept less than you deserve. Just because something was important to you at one point doesn't mean it has to remain important forever. People grow. Circumstances change. What served you 5 years ago might be holding you back today, and that's okay. It's more than okay. It's necessary. Growth requires you to let go of what no longer fits. It requires you to be willing to walk away from the familiar, even when the unfamiliar is scary. It requires you to trust that better is coming, even when you can't see it yet. Detaching quietly is an act of faith in yourself. It's saying, I believe I deserve relationships that don't require me to diminish myself. I believe I'm worthy of connections that feel easy and reciprocal. I believe my peace is more valuable than anyone's temporary presence. What I've also discovered is that detaching quietly doesn't mean you become emotionless or indifferent. It means you become selective about where you invest your emotions. It means you stop reacting to every provocation and start responding intentionally. There's a difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is immediate, emotional, often regrettable. Responding is thoughtful, measured, intentional. When someone tries to provoke you and you react, you give them power. They know they can control your emotions, they can dictate your behavior, they can make you act out of character. But when you respond, or better yet, when you choose not to respond at all, you maintain your power. You show them that their opinion doesn't control you, their behavior doesn't define you, their presence or absence doesn't determine your worth. I've practiced this in so many situations. Family members who tried to push my buttons during holidays, colleagues who tried to undermine me at work, former friends who tried to pull me into gossip. In each case, my old self would have engaged immediately. I would have defended myself, argued my point, tried to make them see my perspective. But my evolved self understands that not every battle is worth fighting. Some people aren't looking for understanding, they're looking for entertainment. And I refuse to be anyone's source of drama. The peace that comes from this practice is unmatched. When you stop giving people the reaction they want, when you stop participating in the chaos they create, you protect your energy for things that actually matter. You have more mental space for your goals, your creativity, your own healing. You're not constantly replaying arguments in your mind or strategizing about how to handle difficult people. You just live your life, and the difficult people either adjust or exit. Either way, you're fine. One thing I want to emphasize is that detaching quietly isn't about being passive or avoiding necessary confrontation. There are absolutely times when you need to speak up, set clear boundaries, or address issues directly. But there's a difference between standing up for yourself and getting dragged into endless cycles of drama. There's a difference between stating your boundaries once clearly and repeatedly explaining yourself to people who have no intention of respecting those boundaries. Detaching quietly means you state your truth once, clearly and firmly, and then you let your actions back it up. You don't keep explaining. You don't keep justifying. You don't keep trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You just make your choice and move forward with consistency. If someone can't respect your boundaries after you've clearly communicated them, that's information. That tells you they're not interested in a healthy relationship with you. They're interested in maintaining control. I used to think that if I just explained myself better, if I just found the right words, people would understand and change their behavior. But I've learned that understanding isn't the issue most of the time. People understand exactly what they're doing. They just don't care because it benefits them. When someone consistently disrespects your boundaries, it's not because they don't understand. It's because they don't value your comfort as much as they value their own desires. Detaching quietly in these situations is self-preservation. It's recognizing that you can't change people who don't want to change. You can't force people to treat you with respect. You can't make people value you, but you can control how much access they have to you. You can control whether you continue to participate in dynamics that hurt you. You can control whether you invest your energy in people who have shown you through consistent action that they don't deserve it. This practice has taught me to pay attention to patterns rather than apologies. People can apologize beautifully. They can say all the right things, express remorse, promise to do better. But if the behavior doesn't change, the apology was just words designed to keep you engaged. Real change shows up in consistent action over time. Real growth means someone doesn't just apologize for hurting you, they actually change the behavior that caused the hurt. When you detach quietly, you create the space to observe these patterns clearly. You're not caught up in the emotional intensity of the moment. You're not desperately hoping things will be different this time. You're just watching, noticing, paying attention to what people do rather than what they say. And this clarity is invaluable. It protects you from repeating the same cycles with the same people. It helps you recognize red flags earlier. It teaches you to trust actions over words. I've had people come back into my life after I've detached quietly, and I've learned to evaluate those returns carefully. Just because someone comes back doesn't mean they deserve access again. Just because someone realized they miss you doesn't mean the fundamental issues have been resolved. I ask myself questions now that I never used to ask. What's different? What has changed in their behavior, not just their words? Why are they coming back now? What do they want from me? And most importantly, do I actually want them back in my life, or am I just responding to the familiar? Sometimes people come back because they genuinely miss you and want to repair the relationship. They've done their own work, they've reflected on their behavior, and they're ready to show up differently. These returns can be beautiful. They can lead to deeper, more authentic connections because both people have grown and are coming together from a healthier place. But other times, people come back because they've exhausted their other options. They come back because they need something and they remember you were always willing to help. They come back because they're bored or lonely or looking for validation. They haven't changed at all. They're just hoping you have a short memory or low standards. And if you let them back in without requiring evidence of real change, you're setting yourself up for the same disappointment. This is why the quiet part of detaching quietly is so important. When you make a big announcement about cutting people off, when you create drama around your departure, you're still giving those relationships energy. You're still making them central to your story. But when you just quietly step back, when you create distance without fanfare, you give yourself the space to truly evaluate what you want moving forward. You're not making decisions in the heat of anger. You're not cutting people off to hurt them or prove a point. You're simply creating space for yourself. And in that space, you gain clarity about what you actually want your life to look like. You start to understand the difference between the relationships you're attached to out of habit and the relationships that genuinely add value to your life. I can't tell you how many times I've detached quietly from a situation only to realize weeks or months later that I don't actually miss it. I miss the idea of it. I miss what I hoped it would be. But the reality of what it actually was, I'm relieved to be free from that. And that relief is a signal. It tells me I made the right choice. It tells me that what I thought I was losing was actually a weight I was carrying. The relationships that were meant for me, the ones that were genuine and reciprocal, those didn't disappear when I detached quietly. Those people understood that I needed space and they respected it. They didn't create drama or spread rumors. They didn't make my need for space about them. They just trusted that I was taking care of myself and they remained available without being intrusive. And when I was ready to reconnect, when I had processed what I needed to process, those relationships were still there, stronger than before because they had survived the test of distance. This taught me something crucial. Real relationships can handle space. Healthy connections don't fall apart just because you're not constantly tending to them. Secure people don't panic when you pull back temporarily. They understand that everyone needs time alone, time to recharge, time to focus on themselves. They don't interpret your need for space as rejection because they're not insecure about their place in your life. But insecure people, manipulative people, people who see you as an object to be controlled rather than a person to be respected, they can't handle your independence. They need you dependent on them. They need you seeking their approval, their validation, their presence. When you stop needing them, when you show them that you're perfectly fine on your own, it threatens their sense of importance. And that's when you see their true character. I've learned to see people's reactions to my boundaries as information about them, not about me. If someone gets angry when I say no, that tells me they value their wants more than my limits. If someone guilt trips me for choosing myself, that tells me they've gotten used to me choosing them at my own expense. If someone can't respect my need for space, that tells me they're more interested in access than in my well-being. These realizations used to make me sad. I used to wish people would just do better, be better, show up better. But now I understand that everyone is on their own journey. Some people are ready for healthy relationships and some aren't. Some people have done the inner work to be secure and some haven't. And that's not my responsibility to fix. My responsibility is to protect my peace, honor my boundaries, and only invest in relationships where there's mutual respect and reciprocity. Detaching quietly has also taught me about my own worth. For a long time, I thought my value came from how useful I was to others. I thought being needed made me important. I thought being there for everyone made me a good person. But I've learned that real value doesn't come from self-sacrifice. It comes from self-respect. When you respect yourself enough to step back from situations that harm you, you send a message to yourself and to others. You say, I matter, my peace matters, my mental health matters. I'm not willing to destroy myself to make others comfortable. This self-respect is attractive to healthy people and repellent to toxic people. It's a natural filter that helps you build a life surrounded by people who genuinely value you. I notice now when people only reach out when they need something. I notice when conversations are always about them and never about me. I notice when people make time for everyone except me and then expect me to drop everything when they finally call. I notice these patterns because I'm paying attention now. I'm no longer making excuses for people's behavior or convincing myself that I'm being too sensitive. And when I notice these patterns, I don't create drama. I don't call people out. I don't send long messages explaining how they've disappointed me. I just quietly adjust my level of investment. I match their energy. I reciprocate what they're giving me, which is often very little. And if they notice the shift and ask about it, then we can have a conversation. But if they don't even notice, that tells me everything I need to know. This approach has saved me so much emotional energy. I used to exhaust myself trying to make people care, trying to convince people I was worth their time, trying to maintain relationships single-handedly. Now, I understand that relationships should flow naturally. They should be reciprocal. They should feel good more often than they feel hard. And when they consistently feel hard, when I'm consistently the only one putting in effort, that's not a relationship worth maintaining. One of the most freeing realizations I've had is that I don't owe anyone my presence. I don't owe anyone access to me. I don't owe anyone an explanation for my boundaries. For so long, I thought I had to have a good reason to create distance from someone. I thought I needed to justify my choices, to prove that I had been hurt enough to warrant pulling back. But that's not true. You don't need anyone's permission to protect your peace. You don't need to wait until someone has hurt you badly enough to justify creating boundaries. You can simply decide that a relationship no longer serves you and step back. You can decide that someone's energy doesn't align with yours anymore and create distance. You can decide that you're in a different season of life and the people who fit your old season don't fit your new one. This doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you someone who understands that life is constantly changing and relationships need to evolve with those changes or naturally fade. Not every person is meant to be in your life forever. Some people are there for a season, to teach you something, to help you through something, to show you what you don't want. And when that season is over, it's okay to let them go. Detaching quietly honors the time you shared with someone while also honoring your current needs. It's not about erasing history or pretending the relationship never mattered. It's about acknowledging that things change, people change, and what worked before might not work now. It's about being mature enough to recognize when something has run its course and being brave enough to let it end. I've practiced this with family members too, which I know can be especially difficult. There's this idea that family is forever, that blood is thicker than water, that you have to maintain relationships with family members no matter how toxic they are. But I've learned that biology doesn't entitle anyone to abuse your boundaries, disrespect you consistently, or drain your peace. You can love family members from a distance. You can wish them well without being actively involved in their lives. You can honor the connection you share without subjecting yourself to harmful dynamics. Detaching quietly from toxic family situations is often necessary for your own well-being, and it doesn't make you disloyal or ungrateful. It makes you someone who understands that you can't pour from an empty cup. The guilt around this can be intense. Society tells us we're supposed to prioritize family above all else. But what about prioritizing your mental health? What about prioritizing your peace? What about prioritizing relationships that are actually healthy and reciprocal? These things matter too. These things matter just as much, if not more. I've had to detach quietly from family dynamics where I was always the scapegoat, always the one blamed for everything, always expected to be understanding while receiving no understanding in return. I've had to step back from family gatherings that left me feeling worse about myself than before I attended. I've had to create boundaries with family members who felt entitled to my time, my money, my emotional support without offering any of those things back. And you know what? The sky didn't fall. Life went on. I actually became happier, healthier, more at peace. The relationships I maintained improved because I was no longer showing up resentful and depleted. I had energy for the people who actually added value to my life. I stopped participating in dysfunction, and that gave me space to create a healthier life for myself.